Alrighty, so today we're revisiting this idea of percent proportions, but y'all, the bigger the better. We're talking about percents bigger than 100. So, a percent, start with a little review here. A percent is the specified amount in or for every 100. One part for every 100. We know that a percent proportion problem, so what we've been working on in math, we know that a percent proportion problem, there will be two ratios that are equal. The first ratio compares part to whole, and the second shows the percent over 100, over 100. So kind of written as that part over whole equals, so this is our first ratio, and the second ratio is percent over 100, which really is just how we write a percent as a fraction. So these are the two ratios that are equal to each other. The part to whole, and then our percent as a fraction. We've previously talked about cross multiplication. That's just one strategy. There are other strategies as well. This just happens to be the one that I focused on in these past two videos, where we assign a variable, right, an unknown letter, to the missing section and then solve for that variable. Now, what could your variable be? Variable can be whatever letter you want. Remember, the variable can be whatever letter you want. So important, choice, autonomy, unless the question specifically says where P represents percent or where A represents the part, then obviously read the directions. But when you're looking at a word problem, some of the tricks that help us is that when we're looking for the part in setting up our ratio, the part is often asked as is. The whole is often asked as of. And then the percent is often asked as percent because no one's creative. It's fine. So just to clarify here, when we're looking for part, the part, we're going to put that right here. So in a problem, if they said 10 is blah, 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 10 would go where you see is. The whole is often asked as of. So in our proportional ratio here, we've got whole. We're going to write that underneath is, right? Because we have our part compared to our whole. And then our percent. Oh, purple. I thought that was going to be blue, but everything's fine. Is going to go on top of 100, right? Because we write a percent as a fraction. Sometimes that percent can be bigger than 100. Greater than 100. I'm so sorry. I just wrote 100 as less than, which isn't wrong. It's just not how I wanted to draw that. LOL. Greater than. That's the greater than symbol. There's 100. So percents can be greater than 100. What? How is that possible? If a percent is compared to every 100, how can it be bigger than 100? The same way that we have fractions that are bigger than 100. 6 over 2 is just 3, right? So the same way that we can have fractions that are greater than one whole, we can also have percents that are greater than one whole. I want to show you an example using cross multiplication. And remember, if you feel like, wow, you're talking really fast, you can always adjust the speed of this video in the corner, or you can go back and rewatch a part. 10 is what percent of 5? So I'm going to break this down. I've got 10 is what percent of 5? I'm not going to do this for every problem, but just for this first one, I am going to color code it. So my is, my whole is of, and then my percent. I'm just color coding that for this problem. I won't make you do that for everyone. So if I was to set up my ratio, I have 10, right? Because that's my is. What percent? I don't know my percent, so I'm just going to write P for percent, right? I'm using a variable because I don't know what it is. And that's always over 100. Of 5. So my 5 goes right here. So for the visuals, right, this is my percent. My of, that's the one whole, and then my is. So cross multiplication is a strategy where I'm basically just rewriting this proportional relationship as an equation. So cross multiply, I'm going to multiply P times 5. 5 times P is 5P. And then I have 10 times 100. 10 times 100 is 1,000. So 5P equals 1,000. Now, I need to divide by the number next to my variable because, remember, there's an invisible little multiplication sign right there. So divide both sides by 5. I have P by itself. 1,000 divided by 5, you could use a calculator. You could do this off to the side if you wanted to. 5 goes into 10 2 times, and then 0, 0. You get 200. So 10 is what percent of 5? 200%. So this is my percent. 10 is 200% of 5, which makes sense, right? It's twice as big as the number 5. So if 100% of 5 is 5, 200%, that's 10. Oh my gosh, making some connections. I'm going to do 4 guided practice problems, and then you're going to tackle some by yourself down here. I've got this image here as a great reference. Of course, our goal is to eventually be able to do these with such fluency that we don't need that written there, but for right now, it's an appropriate tool to use. So let's start with A. 100 is what percent of 20? Remember, I'm being a little obnoxious. 100 is of what percent? So 100 is, so it goes on top. Of 20, so I know 20 is on the bottom. I don't know my percent. It says what percent? So I'm just going to put P over and then 100. Where does this 100 come from? It comes from right here, right? Percent written as a fraction. So I'm going to cross multiply. P times 20 is 20P. 100 times 100. Woo! That is a big one. If you're wondering how I did that so fast in my head, when we're multiplying by tens, right, we can do that little trick where we're adding those zeros because it's powers of 10. Kind of cool. This is the same thing. 20p is the same thing as 20 times p. So I can divide both sides by 20. And you can use a calculator or not. The way my brain does this mental math is I see 100 and I think, oh, well, 100 divided by 20 is 5. That's something that I know from my memory. And then I've got these extra zeros. That's how I did that mental math. But again, you can use a calculator. That's fine. So P equals 500. It's a percent. So 100 is what percent of 20? 500%. It is 5 times bigger than 20. All right. This time I won't use the color coordinating, I promise. 90 is what percent of 15? 90 is what percent of 15? 90 is of 15. I don't know my percent. Great. Cross multiply. 15 times P gives me 15P. 90 times 100 gives me 9,000. Again, 9 times 1, and then put those zeros there. We divide by 15. Got to get that variable by itself. And again, my mental math, you can use a calculator, but my mental math goes, oh, well, 90 divided by 15, my brain's like, oh, that's 6. And then add those zeros at the end. So 600%. Woo! It's big. 90 is 600% of 15. 6 times as big as 15. All right, we've had some pretty chill ones so far. We're going to start to make things a little bit more complicated. It's okay. We're still in our guided practice. We are going to make things a little bit more complicated. And I'm going to use the color coding for this one. What number is 120% of 60? What number is... Oh, no, I don't know my number. What? I'm going to use X because I don't know what my is. I don't know what that number is. It says what number? I don't know. X of 60, so then it's over 60, equals 120 over 100. Again, they gave me my percent, so I already know my percent. They gave me my of, so I already know my of. I don't know the is, though, right? I don't know what number is 120%. That's why I chose to use the letter X. Let's go ahead and cross multiply. It is my personal preference to always multiply the variable first, but you don't have to do that. So 100 times x is 100x. 60 times 120, you can do that on your calculator. My brain does 6 times 12, which gives me 72, and then I add my zeros. I got some invisible math happening here, 100 times x, so I need to divide by 100, that inverse operation. And I get x equals 7,200 or 7,200 divided by 100 gives me 72. How did I do that without a calculator? Well, 72 divided by 1 and then cancel out my zeros. That is kind of a sloppy, but that is 72. So what number is 120% of 60? 72. 72 is 120% of 60. It is bigger than 60, specifically an increase of 20%. All right, what number is 150% of 200? All right, what number is, I don't know, 150% of 200? What number is, I don't know my is, oh, sad day, x. Of 200 equals 150%. Again, if you're wondering why I'm putting this over 100, it's because that's how we write a percent as a fraction, right? We put that percent over 100. So I know it looks weird because it's bigger than 100, but that's what 150% looks like as a fraction. So let's cross multiply. 100 times x, we have 100x. 150 times 200. I'm going to double check that one with my calculator. I did some mental math there, and I just want to make sure that I'm not misleading anybody with that mental math. Excellent. My mental math here was I took 15 times 2 to get 30 and then added those 3 extra zeros because I still had those 3 zeros. Just wanted to make sure that I wasn't misleading anybody. I'm going to divide both sides by 100 because that's the number next to my variable. I keep saying variable. Remember, that's the unknown letter. So in this case, my variable is x. I get x equals 300, like the movie. Maybe you don't even know that reference. So what number is 150% of 200? 300. 300. And that kind of makes sense because 150% of 200, well, 100% would be 200. 50% of 200 would be an additional 100, right? Because 50% of 200 would be 100. Oh my gosh, look at that, 300. Happy days. All right. Boom. You're going to go ahead and tackle the independent practice. That's questions E, F, and G. And tackle questions E, F, and G on your own. That's right, on your own. What? I am a crazy person. Yes, tackle those on your own. And of course, as always, make sure that you make good life choices.